Welcome back. We went over yesterday talking about income and expenses primarily, um, and also a little bit about like what debt is and saving and investing. Today we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into understanding debt and interest. Let's see if this works. Okay, there we go. So interest is the cost of borrowing money, or the return earned on an investment. So interest can work for your favor or against you depending on if you're borrowing or investing. So we're going to look at interest earned, which is the profit that you make from money that you invest over time through interest. So an example of something like this would be like savings accounts help you earn interest, CDs, money market accounts, stocks and bonds, investment accounts. Those are all ways to earn interest. And we're going to come up with this little example, the simple interest formula, where it's just I equals P times R times T. And this is just simple interest that's not being compounded interest that just kind of gives you a quick idea on how much interest that you made. So I stands for the interest earned or paid. P stands for the principal, which is the initial amount of money you invest. R is the interest rate that we write as a decimal, and T is the years. So suppose you invest $1,000 into a savings account, and the annual interest rate is 5% for 3 years. How much interest did you earn? Well, we're going to plug all of this stuff into this formula where my P is the amount I initially invested, my R is my interest rate written as a decimal, and my T is 3 for 3 years. If I plug all of those in, that's what my interest should equal, and that comes out to $150. So you put in $1,000, you don't touch that account. 3 years later, you now have $1,150 in there because you have the $1,000 you put in, and you've earned $150 in interest for just letting your money sit in there for doing nothing. The interest paid is the cost of borrowing money or using credit over a specific period, which can contribute to overall debt. So here's an example with credit cards, mortgages, car loans, personal loans, etc. You guys have heard of the compound interest formula. It looks like this, where A is the amount of money accumulated after so many years, including interest, like your total amount. P is our initial amount, just like in the simple interest. Our R is our annual rate as a decimal, just like in the simple interest we saw. We see this new letter N that shows up. That's to find N. That's if it says compounded, whatever word precedes compounded. It's you ask yourself how many times that thing happens in a year. So if you see compounded annually or compounded quarterly or monthly or weekly or daily, just say how many times, how many quarters are in a year, how many months are in a year, how many weeks are in a year. That's how you determine what index. And T is the time, usually in years, like we just talked about. So compound interest is the interest that's on a loan or investment that is calculated based on both the initial principal and the accumulated interest from previous periods. So it's kind of like interest on top of interest. This means that the amount of interest earned or owed increases over time as the interest compounds. So the more frequently the compounded, the better return it is if you invest, or the more you owe in interest if you're borrowing. The different variables, we just talked about those. So here we're going to look at where John takes out a loan of $2,000 to buy a laptop. The loan has an interest rate of 5% compounded monthly. John plans to pay off the loan in 2 years. How much will he owe at the end of 2 years? So keep in mind, think about this when we're borrowing something. You buy $2,000, and before we do this problem, you buy a $2,000 laptop. At the end of 2 years, you finally pay that laptop off. But what is that laptop, do you think, worth now, 2 years old in technology? Like, I don't know, maybe 800, maybe 600. So you have a laptop that you can sell for way less than what you bought for, and you actually paid more than what it was worth. So some of these things, like buying things that are not necessity on a loan or a credit card, unless they're absolutely necessary, like you need something for school, like that's where people get in problems with debt. So our initial amount is going to be our the amount of the loan, the $2,000. Our rate written as a decimal is 0.05. We said it's compounded monthly. There's 12 months in a year. That gives me my N. And we're going to look at this thing for 2 years. So we're going to plug all of those things into our formula. I can type this in. When you go and you use your calculator, like this part right here, I would literally type in parentheses 1 plus, and then I would hit alpha y equals enter to get my fraction bar so I can write that thing, and then raise everything to the 12 times 2. You can type this in and make sure it's exactly like mine does on my screen. Hit enter, and we should get $2,209.88. So once again, you bought a laptop 2 years ago for $2,000. You just finished paying off today for $2,209.88, and now that laptop is super slow because it's 2 years old, and you need another one, and you want to sell it. So how much can you sell it for? Who knows? I don't know the value of it or the specific laptops, but it's definitely probably not going to be what you paid. Well, it was not going to be at least the $2,000, but you end up paying $2,200 for a $2,000 laptop, and you can only sell it now for way less than that. Okay, part B. How much did John pay in interest on the loan? So to determine that, well, if he bought the laptop for $2,000 and paid $2,209.88, the difference of those two things is the interest, right? That's what he's paying. So I'm going to take that total amount, which is the $2,209.88, and subtract the initial amount, and that tells me he spent $209.88 on interest. So that's the cost of him borrowing the $2,000 to buy the laptop was $209.88. Let's look at this one. Sarah wants to invest $1,000 in a savings account that pays 4% interest. So it's important to understand too, as we're reading through these, which one of these are investing and which one of them are borrowing. So she's putting this into a savings account. So this is going to benefit her. That pays 4% interest compounded quarterly. She plans to leave the money in an account for 3 years. How much will she have in her account after 3 years? So part A, her initial amount that she puts in is $1,000. The interest rate's 4%. As a decimal, that would be 0.04. Compounded quarterly, there's 4 quarters in a year, just like there's 4 seasons in a year. And then this is after 3 years. So if I plug all that stuff into my calculator and hit enter, just plugging those in, I get $1,126.83. So for leaving that in there, she made $126.83 in interest alone. How do I know that? Part B, I'm going to take my total amount, subtract what I initially invested. She only contributed $1,000. She only put in $1,000, and in 3 years she had $1,126. So she made interest for just kind of letting her money sit there. So that was interest. Let's talk about debt for a second. That's the obligation to repay borrowed money, usually with interest under agreed upon terms. And there are good types of debt and bad types of debt. Good debt is typically considered an investment that will generate income or appreciate over time. Some examples of that would be like housing or real estate, mortgages, something like that. Homes typically appreciate over time. So when you buy a home, you're paying that off, and as that principal that you're paying off gets less and less because you keep paying that amount, that loan down, your value is going up, and so that's actually a good thing. Student loans, business loans, so things that are going to add value or appreciate. Some things that are investment loans, things like that. Some bad debt would be things that do not create value and lead to financial strain. So credit card debt, payday loans for sure. Personal loans for non-essential purchases, and any debt that does not generate a return. Also, a lot of like vehicle type luxury vehicles or any type of auto loan. Really, you guys may have heard like your car depreciates in value the second you drive it off the lot. So yeah. Anyways, but we have to drive, and cars are expensive, so a lot of times we don't have any other option but to finance a vehicle, which we'll actually do a little activity on later on. So repaying debt is the total amount you repay is often influenced by your interest rate, which is typically determined by your credit score. So we're just going to kind of go down the road and kind of walk through a process of this stuff. So these things all tie into each other. How much you pay back, how much your interest rate is, that is going to affect how much you either pay or earn. And when it comes to repaying debt, Your interest rate is determined by your credit score. And your credit score is a 3-digit number ranging from 300 to 850 and represents how reliable you are when it comes to borrowing money. This number is based on your history of paying bills, handling debts, and using credits. So when you have a higher credit score, like 800 or 750, that usually qualifies you to have a lower interest rate, meaning you pay less than somebody else, reducing overall cost of borrowing, and generally means you're more likely to get approved, a loan approved. If your credit score is really low and you're trying to go get a house and get a loan for a house, you may not be able to because your credit score is too low, and the mortgage company is like, we're not trusting this guy to pay back our loan, and we just gave him a loan for $350,000. So we're going to deny it. And then you're having to rent or you're having to get an apartment. And having an apartment and renting a place are fine. But when you own your own home, that, like I said, that value increases. And when you sell that home, you can also potentially earn a lot of money from what's called equity, what we'll talk about later on. Lower credit score may lead to higher interest rates, resulting in more money paid back over time, and or the denial of a loan you were trying to obtain for things like cars, houses, or student loans. So if you go in and you try to buy a car but your credit score is not high, they can say, sorry, we can't sell to you. But you may have a cosigner, and then you might have to go and ask your dad or your grandma or something like that to cosign, which means if you default on that loan, that affects their credit too. So if they don't trust you to pay that back, then they may not cosign for you. So, how to get a good credit score? Start by paying your bills on time. Late payments can hurt your credit score. Also, avoid opening too many accounts at once. Each credit application can temporarily lower your score. Keep your credit authorization or utilization low, and try to use less than 30% of your available credit at all times. This shows that you can manage credit responsibly. Ways to get a bad credit score: missing payments or late payments. Defaulting on loans, so not repaying a loan can lead to bad credit or making it harder to borrow a loan in the future. So it's understanding these things when you're young are going to impact your future, right? Because if you don't take it seriously when you're 22, 23, 24, you make these decisions and then you meet somebody and you want to go and buy a house because you're starting a family and you have a kid along the way and you're trying to buy a house. Well, those 3 months of payments that you skipped out on in your house, on your rent or something like that, can affect your credit score and cause you not to be able to get approved for a loan for a house. Also, high credit utilization. Using large portions of your available credit makes you look like a risky borrower. So to summarize, building and maintaining a good credit score is important because it affects your ability to borrow money and the interest rates you'll pay, which can save or cost you a lot of money in the long run. So some credit score ranges. These are considered excellent. So a credit score between 750 to 850. This is considered very low risk, eligible for the best rates. If you have a credit score between 770, 749, that's considered good. You're still low risk, and you still can probably get good terms available. When you're fair, that's between 650 and 699, kind of a moderate risk, and your options may be somewhat limited. And poor is below 650, high risk, fewer options and higher rates, and possibly denying a loan. So let's look at an example real quick, utilizing credit scores, just kind of throwing in there. So we're going to look at, and I just made these up, but this is like a realistic example. So Thomas has a credit score of 700, which is considered good. He applied for a personal loan from Wells Fargo to buy a motorcycle for $5,000. He got approved, and his annual interest rate was 7% compounded weekly with a 36-month term. How much money did Thomas spend on his motorcycle with interest? So he borrowed $5,000. That was the initial amount. His interest rate was 0.07 because of his credit score. It was compounded weekly, so there's 52 weeks in a year. And 36 months is 3 years. So we're going to put the yearly amount here. So there's 3 years there. When I plug that all in, we should get $6,167.52. So how much he paid in interest? Well, he spent $5,000 on this, and he paid the bank back 61, 67, and 52 cents. So 5,000 of that amount was for the motorcycle. The difference of that is the interest that he paid. So over those 5 years, he ended up. So think about it this way: this motorcycle that was worth $5,000, he actually spent $6,100 on, right? And now he's going to go sell it. Like if he sells it, and it's 3 years older than what it was when he bought it, the value is going to be less. So uh, that's something to consider. Now let's look at his brother. So his brother wants to be able to ride with Thomas on the weekends. So he wants to get. Let's just say that he's going to get the same motorcycle. Like obviously not the same one, but the same brand, same everything on it. Maybe different color, but it's also $5,000. He gets it at Credit RS Bank because he has to go to some place like that because his credit score is considered fair at 620. He was approved, but he had to pay 16.99% compounded monthly for 3 years. So everything's pretty much the same here, except his credit score is lower than his brother Thomas, so therefore his interest rate is higher. So let's see what happens with Jim. There's his initial amount, his rate. It's compounded monthly, and actually it's monthly. I think Thomas was weekly, and t equals 3. So when I plug all of that in, and I hit enter, I get $8,294.26. So now looking at how much he spent on interest, well, he borrowed $5,000. The difference of that is the interest payment. So the cost of borrowing $5,000 based off of his credit score. Okay, so that is all we have, kind of our introduction to or elaboration on interest and debt, and then we'll continue to move on tomorrow or the next day, whenever we get back together.